supporting Black businesses isn't the only step that we must take. I've learned there are 3 different components. 1, of course, supporting Black businesses. 2, creating more Black entrepreneurs in our communities and more of a wealth and broader spectrum of businesses. And 3, creatively sharing our resources.
Hi, Mandy. Thank you so much for joining us this evening at the Parsons Entrepreneur Academy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love that intro. It took me down memory lane.
Well, you've accomplished so many amazing things with your platform, the official Black Wall Street. So we're excited to have you share your story of how you've built the platform and to share what the true mission of the platform is. So let's kick things off by having you give us a quick snapshot of your background and tell us what led you to being inspired to start the official Black Wall Street.
No problem. I'll try and keep this quick. But to start with, we'll go back to college. I went to Babson College and I studied entrepreneurship and global business management. After graduating in the corporate world, my experience was always in digital marketing and entertainment and media. I would say my first job out of college was at Atlantic Records in digital marketing. And while I was at Atlantic, that was when I had the idea for creating official Black Wall Street. During that time, I had just learned about Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the historic neighborhood. And well, there were multiple reasons. That was one of them. I was really inspired by this part of our history, especially as someone being an aspiring entrepreneur. So learning about this community that was so prosperous and had all of these flourishing Black entrepreneurs, for me, it really did help for, my own aspirations. Aside from that, just doing a lot of research on Black entrepreneurship in general, I had learned so many different stats about the different challenges that we face when it comes to receiving funding for our businesses. The Washington Post came out with a stat showing that even when we are equally qualified, Black entrepreneurs are usually shut out of loans from banks. And when we do get those loans, the interest rate is about 32% higher. There are stats about how a lot of Black entrepreneurs don't have the same revenue, we don't have the same resources, and so scaling is usually an uphill battle. And so learning all of these different things, and especially growing up in Brooklyn, New York, where I was able to literally watch the changes of that gentrification brought to our neighborhood, it just really inspired me to go out and support as many Black-owned businesses in my area as possible. So official Black Wall Street started really, really tiny, and it kind of grew from there.
All right, so talking about growth. So today there is a mobile app that people can go on and use to access these businesses, but that isn't how it started, right? I love having entrepreneurs break down their evolution, because you see a technology or a solution, it doesn't necessarily start here. It's an iterative process. So tell us how you got started and what the different phases were in the evolution to you now having this mobile app. How did you start the platform itself?
Yes, it was definitely a process. I'm glad you used that word. So official Black Wall Street began as a spreadsheet. I think this was in 2014. Learning about, Tulsa, Oklahoma and Black Wall Street down there, and then seeing a lot of the businesses close in my neighborhood, I literally just created a spreadsheet and decided I would do my own research and just find different Black-owned businesses in my community and go out and support them. And that spreadsheet continued growing and growing and growing to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that there were all of these amazing Black-owned businesses right in my backyard. And so I created social pages and started building this community of conscious consumers and sharing the businesses that I came across. So we went from a spreadsheet to social pages. That community just took off and continued growing. And the demand for a website began growing. And so at that point, I began working on a website. And I think it was a year after, or a few months after we had launched the website, that I had our first business owner reached out to me and asked me how much it was to advertise on our platform. So that was kind of when Official Black Wall Street went from being something that I was really passionate about to be like, wait a minute, this could actually be my full-time position. And so in 2016, I launched a Kickstarter. I'm so used to saying we. Back then it was just me. But I launched a Kickstarter to raise the funds for the development of an app. We raised over $33,000. And in 2017, we launched the app for it. And now in 2021, we're getting ready to relaunch the website and the app. So it's super exciting.
Well, thank you so much for breaking that down. It's always great to hear of the process of people building a business on top of a community and really listening to the needs of the community before moving to the next step.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So let's talk about the app and the business model. If I were a Black business owner or a Black entrepreneur, what are the steps to getting on the platform and what are the different services that would be available to me?
Oh, we have so many, and I'm so proud of the platform that we've built for Black entrepreneurs. We really wanted to make sure that we weren't just sharing their businesses, but that we were giving them the different resources that they needed to continue growing. So now a business owner can go on the platform. They can sign up for our subscription membership. And with that, they'll be able to list their business. We have businesses across various different categories. And they'll also be able to receive a ton of resources that we've been cultivating. We just secured a partnership the end of last year with global law firm Baker Botts to provide all of the entrepreneurs on our platform with free legal services over the next 3 years. So signing up will also get you that. We also do a ton of different activations and video series with other partners. And so we have a lot of entrepreneurs on our platform who are featured in our content, our videos, our different listicles. So we definitely make sure that, or try to make sure that, you know, we're cultivating this platform that really helps Black business owners.
So just to give our viewers an idea of the breadth of what exists in your ecosystem, can you tell us the industries that are represented in your platform and also where, you know, some of your businesses are located? Yeah,
so we literally have thousands of businesses in hundreds of categories, literally across all different industries. There are restaurants, pharmacies, e-commerce boutiques, accountants, anything you can think of, we have something like that on there. And most of the businesses listed are, of course, in the US, but we also have businesses that are across seas in 10 other countries. So that includes Canada, the UK, the Netherlands, China, Japan, and even parts of the Caribbean. Whenever I say that part, people always look at me like I'm crazy because they're like, oh, well, the majority are Black there. But when you look at the stats, one thing that I learned a few years ago is that even when it comes to tourism, 70% of the tourism dollars goes back to Europe, and it doesn't stay in the islands. So it's super important that we support there too.
All right. So going back to something that you just touched on, I was watching your TED Talk, I believe the one you did at Dover, and you were breaking down the stats of, you know, the circulation of, you know, dollars within different communities. And you talked about, you know, the breakdown of, you know, how long the Black dollar circulates within the Black community. Let's talk about that and why that's important, because you built this platform, and yes, it is a platform that gives visibility to businesses, but there's this deeper mission of, you know, trying to move a community forward and provide financial freedom. So tell us, let's talk about why that's important, the circulation of the Black dollar in the Black community and how that ties to your mission.
Yeah, it all comes back to local economies and different communities. One of the most startling facts I found when I was beginning Official Black Wall Street was that in Asian and Jewish communities, a dollar circulates for 20 days to a month, respectively. However, in Black communities, it circulates for only 6 hours. So a month to 6 hours, and then it leaves the community. So even when it comes to supporting Black businesses, we're not just supporting corporations, we're supporting families, we're helping to increase generational wealth. We're also helping these businesses hire within our neighborhoods as well. So when you support, it really does bring money back into our communities.
That's amazing. And there's an interesting stat that I found as well, going back to the original Black Wall Street in Tulsa. When that community was thriving, the Black dollar actually circulated at least 36 times within the neighborhood and among the people there.
Wow, that is amazing. Can you imagine that today?
Well, that's what you're building the foundations of.
Yes, we'll get there, I'm sure.
All right, so looking at everything that you have built and the mission, talk about mentorship. This is one of my favorite questions to ask every entrepreneur, or because it's a question that a lot of people ask. How do I get a mentor? If I get a mentor, what do I do? What do I ask them? How often do I meet with them? So let's talk about what mentorship has done for your personal and business development. If you have mentors, how did you get your mentor, and how do you continue to build those relationships? What was the impact?
Oh, this one was so tough for me because for me personally, I didn't have any relatives that were entrepreneurs. So I was just like, where do I went to a business school. And so for me, what was really important, since I didn't have anyone close to me that was an entrepreneur, I began looking at my friends and their parents, or my relatives and their connections to see if there were any people that I could tap on. So for me, I ended up going through one of my friends who has parents who are entrepreneurs. And so they were extremely helpful when it came to connecting me with other people, giving me advice on, the do's and the don'ts of being an entrepreneur. Because even though I did go to business school, there are so many things that I did not learn until I was actually in it and doing it for myself. And so even on the flip side, there are other aspiring entrepreneurs that I mentor. And the way that worked out was they literally just contacted me on LinkedIn and, asked me a question, may have followed up via email. But one thing that I think is super important when it comes to me and my mentors is that we make sure that it's not a one-sided relationship, or that I'm not only approaching them whenever I need help or I have a question. If I find an article that is related to their industry, then I'll pass it along, or anything that could be helpful. Sending them monthly updates just on what I'm doing, what Official Black Wall Street is doing, just so that they feel connected to it. And so that, every time they hear from you, it's not asking something or, requesting something from them. So just making sure that it's a two-way street. And it helps out tremendously, because there were a lot of things that there were a lot of mistakes that I didn't have to make because I was able to consult with someone or get feedback from someone. And so it was super helpful.
Yeah, thanks for laying that out. I don't think a lot of times it's looked at as a two-way street. So that's great that you've explained the importance of, in some ways, being able to offer value to a mentor as you continue along in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now that you've built this large community, which, by the way, can you give our audience an idea of how big the official Black Wall Street community is?
Yeah, so we currently have close to 1 million followers across social platforms. We have have had close to 400,000 downloads. And we have close to 6,000 businesses listed across 10 different countries. So we are definitely growing very fast too. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you.
There we
Sorry.
go. No worries.
So, now that you built such a large community, what, you've mentioned some of the challenges early on at the beginning of the conversation that a lot of Black business owners face. What would you say are like the top 3 challenges that you've noticed within your community among business owners and entrepreneurs?
I would say I'm a little biased because this was also a challenge that I faced, but I would say the number one thing is doing it all syndrome, which is what I call it. Being in that position where you have to split yourself a million different ways because you're wearing all the hats in the business. And so for me, that was super challenging because then you're spending so much time working in the business that you don't have time to work on it and to strategize and think of different partnerships and things of that nature. There was even this stat I found that majority of Black entrepreneurs are solopreneurs. They don't even make enough revenue to hire other people. And so that was definitely, I believe that's a really big challenge because it's so hard to grow and to even strategize what your next step or your next level will be if you're so tied up in the day-to-day of the business. So I think that's definitely a major challenge. And then on top of that, this is a given, but we know that funding has been a major challenge for Black entrepreneurs. There are so many stats I found. One of the most alarming that I found was, I think it was Fast Company that reported this, but Black women receive less than 1 or 2% of all VC funding. All of it, less than 2%, which was so crazy to me, especially being an entrepreneur and being the owner of a startup. And so we know that there are a lot of different challenges that we also face when it comes to funding in other areas, when it comes to financial institutions, bank loans, and things of that nature. So a lot of times we do have to get very creative. One thing that I'm always preaching to other entrepreneurs is that there are so many grants out there, and we kind of, in some positions, you have no choice but to kind of go after all of them because there are all of these challenges elsewhere. I always mention this story, and I should figure out what the name of the business is, but there was a story that I read in NPR of this Black-owned business in St. Louis, Missouri, and they reported consistent annual 6-figure profits. They had a credit score of, I believe, 750 or 760. They didn't have any debt or anything like that, but they were literally struggling to find a loan to keep their business operating during COVID. And so these are a lot of the challenges. You kind of have to be a unicorn in order to be approved for a lot of the loans and a lot of the funding out there.
All right. So thanks for listing those challenges. Going back to the first one, solopreneurs and this idea of, like you have to do it all. How did you navigate that at the beginning? Like what were the ways or solutions that you came up with to, give yourself space to continue to think and strategize? How did you find resources to offload things to and manage?
Oh, that's a good question. A whole lot of trial and error, a whole lot of it. In the very beginning, one thing that I utilized a lot was interns. And so I went to my alma mater and would go back there and ask if, there were any students that wanted to intern at Official Black Wall Street. During that time, it was just me. But, it was a lot of experience because it's only a one-person team and it is a startup. So you get to manage or have your hands in different areas. Another thing that I did, and this was something that I had to get accustomed to, was actually asking for help. That's one of the things that was really hard for me in the very beginning. And so I literally went to some of my friends and was just like, I am drowning. And part of this literally happened a year ago. During the time of the year when everyone was, looking for different Black businesses to support, our platform, our social pages, everything went viral. And we went from like a 2-person team where I was wearing all of these different hats, to me literally having to tap, my friends and be like, hey, can you just help me, with this task? Or, looking at friends who had different skills, and kind of leaning on them a little bit for them to help me during those periods. Until I was able to actually afford to hire other people onto the team.
So having that support community is so important as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. And using it. I can't tell you how many times I speak to entrepreneurs who are in the same boat where you kind of have your head down working on a million different things. And you kind of have to remind them like, hey, you have an amazing network. Like, why aren't you using me and other people in them? So, and that's also a lesson for me. I always have to remind myself of that. Like, okay, there are people in your network who are willing to help and who can help. So tap them.
All right. So you just talked about last year, right? Hitting this point or this moment where your company went viral. Let's talk about, I guess, persistence and consistency over time, right? You built a platform focused on a niche, sort of a niche community and a particular problem, and you focused on that. And at some point, a moment came, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, can you tell us like what were things that you practiced or implemented as an entrepreneur to stay in the game until?
Mm-hmm. Oh, wait, you're muted again. There we go.
Did you hear what I said?
I heard the very beginning of it.
And no, I was going back to what you mentioned about the moment you had last year when you went viral. But you started the business in 2016. So you've been working hard, iterating, going through trial and error. And now this moment happened, right? Which is what happens to a lot of entrepreneurs. Like things don't just take off at the beginning in the first 2 years or 3 years. So like, what were some of the things that you did or things that you practiced to stay consistent, to stay motivated? Because this is not building a business is not easy, obviously. So yeah, like what were things that you practiced to keep you going?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that point where you were like, things don't take off overnight. I remember I told one of my teammates this story, but I remember when I first started Official Black Wall Streeter, was coming up with the idea for it. I found this spreadsheet and I punched a couple of numbers and was like, boom, I should be making millions by like 6 months. And it did not happen that way because like you said, it does take a lot of time. For me, it was super important that first of all, because I was wearing so many different hats, I had to put things into buckets. So there were certain days that I worked on, let's say, administrative things. There were other days when I would focus on marketing and strategy. Other days when I would focus on finding different programs that I could apply to. So I really had to buckle down and create these, I want to say strict, but not as serious as I had to buckle down and create these different guidelines for myself and for my schedule so that I made sure that I stayed on top of things. My background is originally in social media and digital marketing. So I think that was one of the things that definitely gave us an edge, especially when it comes to that landscape in general. I think that was probably the most important part in the very beginning because we were able to grow this massive community. And so by the time that I even launched a website for Official Black Wall Street, we had like over 100,000 followers, engaged followers. And so it was just a matter of serving it to them and saying, hey, here it is. And then continuing to build from there. So yeah, I would say that was the most helpful thing ever, just kind of finding different buckets for things. And also giving myself grace, which honestly, it took me a few years to do that, because there were many times where things did not go as planned. And as an entrepreneur, that's kind of a thing. Things won't go as planned every once in a while. But you kind of get used to it and you learn how to power through and how to also have grace, so that you're not having a mental breakdown every time something doesn't go exactly the way that you want it to.
All right. So another question that I wanted to ask in relation to challenges, like within your community, and this is also in relation to our community, we do serve a lot of creative entrepreneurs. Are there any unique challenges that you've noticed with entrepreneurs who are in the creative industries on your platform or in your community?
I would say in the community in general, I think one big challenge I've seen is just knowing what to do with our intellectual property. I've seen so many instances of creatives not protecting themselves or not protecting, the things that they create properly, and then kind of getting taken advantage of because of it. So I think that that's definitely a big one. And that was one reason why we were so excited about the partnership with Baker Botts, because the whole world of legal, even the language is something you really have to study to learn. And so it's so helpful to have a whole team who's kind of able to hold your hand and walk you through those things so that you're not taking advantage of it in those ways, and so that you kind of hold on to your own IP. I think aside from that, one issue I've seen on my platform when it comes to creatives, and it's not really an issue on a creative's end, but I have noticed that a lot of times when Black creatives create something, it's people think that it's intended just for Black people. I can't tell you how many times we've had allies reach out and say, "Oh, is it okay that I buy this?" And I'm like, "Yes, give them your money." They made it for everyone. So I think that's something that's super important. I've had that conversation all across the board, whether it's a company that makes dolls or a company that makes videos and content featuring Black people. It's like, no, this isn't just for us. We want the whole world to experience it. The whole world should experience it. So I think that's also another limitation that the world puts on Black creatives.
Mm. All right. So this is another fun question that I like asking everyone. And you might have touched on some of these like throughout the conversation, but what are the top 3 lessons that you've learned as an entrepreneur that you think people could benefit from?
Oh, this is a good one. Because one of my favorites, actually, because I love learning from different lessons, and I love hearing about mistakes. But when it comes to lessons, or the top 3 lessons I've learned, so the first one I would say is that it takes time. You're gonna have to test. You can put out a product and then realize that your audience isn't really gelling with it too well. And so it's just a series of trial and error. And I say that all the time because that's literally my biggest lesson. I think even when it comes to what we started with, it's definitely like the idea of Official Black Wall Street has grown so much since then. Even when it comes to small features on the app that we've tested and realized, even if it was something that we were excited about, it's like, oh wait, no one's actually using this thing. So, let's remove it or figure out how we can make it more engaging, or create another feature that people are actually identifying with and actually want to use. So I think that was the biggest lesson, and learning that, just because something doesn't work, it doesn't mean that, things are final. It just means you need to pivot and, change things up a little bit and continue testing. After we launched the app in 2017, we went through maybe a year and a half to 2 years of literally just testing things, looking at feedback, looking at reviews, asking people their opinion about it, doing focus groups, just to figure out what works and what didn't work. And for me, that was where the grace had to come in, because from the time that we launched the app, I was already on version 3. Like, okay, here are the other features that we want to add. When can we do this? And it's like, no. You need to sit with your MVP and test it and figure out what works and what doesn't work. But we're so much better for it today, because we know our audience so well that we can look at things and be like, no, they're not even going to touch this, or absolutely, they're going to love this thing. So that was one major benefit of all of the trial and error. The second lesson is that as an entrepreneur, you are the most important person in your company. And so this was something that took me a very long time to learn, but you should have some grace, and you should also pay yourself. I remember talking to another entrepreneur, and I told her that, I feel so bad, paying myself. And she was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is your company. If not you, who else is going to run it? And that really changed my perspective when it came to that. And then the third lesson, I would say, what's another one? Actually, I would go back to giving myself grace. That wasn't the second one I said, right? Hopefully I'm not repeating one, but I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that being an entrepreneur is hard. It's challenging. There are days when I'm literally like, am I sure I want to still do this? And in talking to other entrepreneurs, I realized that that's actually a normal thing, which made me feel so much better. There are going to be days when you're just like, I'm tired, I don't want to continue, but that's where the passion comes through. So definitely leaning on what your passions are, and then also having grace for those days when things are just not going the way you want it to. The tech isn't working. Being able to take a break, and also, do something that provides some sort of self-care.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So as we get close to the end of the conversation, I want to talk about, like the vision that you have for the official Black Wall Street platform. Right now, we're in the midst of a pandemic, and a platform like this is so important. There's another stat that I got. It actually came from an article about you, and I think it was a stat that you quoted. But since the pandemic started, and it's estimated that 40% of Black-owned businesses have shut down in the US. So it's so important to have platforms like this right now. But can you tell us what the ultimate vision is for the official Black Wall Street? Like, how do you see yourself scaling the impact that you've already started?
Yeah, so I remember that stat. So just to give a little bit more context, it was 40% of all Black-owned businesses shut down over a 4-month period. So we have no idea, even now, we can guess that it's been more. But yeah, that was just a 4-month period, which to me is so crazy. It's almost 500,000 Black-owned businesses all around the country. But when it comes to official Black Wall Street and where we see it going, I definitely see official Black Wall Street being a global ecosystem of Black-owned businesses, and then all of the people who support them. We have so many amazing new features and programs that we have coming out. Even this year, we're currently working on relaunching the app and the website, which will be up by the end of this month. And we literally have like an 8-month road of different features and updates that we're making along the way. So we literally have updates and new features until the end of this year. And they're all geared towards not just making it easier to support Black-owned businesses, but also making it fun and incentivizing people to do more of it. So there is that tech portion. We definitely want to continue building that out and creating an amazing product that will benefit business owners. We also have other apps that we're working on as well, an app that will make it easier for Black entrepreneurs to find different funding opportunities. And then we also have a lot of partnerships that we're working on that will benefit Black entrepreneurs. I mentioned before the one with BakerBots. We also work with Morgan Stanley to educate business owners and consumers on finances and how to manage those, especially during a pandemic. So yeah, we have so much in store. My biggest goal, and I also forgot this one. There's so many things that we want to do this year alone. But we also want to expand. We have businesses in 10 of the countries around the world. We're working with businesses in South Africa and in the Netherlands to do a larger expansion into those countries as well this year, and in Canada. So we have a whole lot in store for us, a whole lot of work. But I'm so excited because there's so much that we can do with this. And when I tell you, we have pages and pages and pages of ideas and goals and features and different things that we want to implement in the near future.
All right. That is amazing. My final question was going to be for you to tell any Black business owners or entrepreneurs watching how they can get on the app and take advantage of the features. But I think you just covered the gamut. But this was such a great conversation and so inspiring, everything that you're doing, Mandy. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for sharing your story. So now we're going to open up to questions, if there are any questions. All right. So there is a question. So I'll read this out. It sounds like official Black Wall Street came straight from your brain, but you've mentioned a team and we. When and how did you go about creating a team? How did you know it was the right time?
Oh, that's an awesome question. So in the very beginning, it was just me for maybe 2 years or so. But because I knew the vision I had for official Black Wall Street, I would literally always speak in we and team. If I was presenting something, I would always say, we are doing X, Y, Z. So by the time I was maybe a year in, people just assumed we had this massive, robust team. And then everything that I produced kind of reflected that. So I went through a few years of trial and error when it came to starting a team. I think starting in 2017. And during this time, for me, it was important that I established some sort of a team because I was also working full time at that point in time. And I was fundraising with our Kickstarter and also working on official Black Wall Street full time-ish. And so it felt like I was working 3 different jobs at one time. In the very beginning, I went about reaching out to my friends who had the skills for the different areas that I wanted to hire for or that I needed help with. As time went on, I think the moment that I knew I absolutely needed more assistance and I needed to create a team was last year, honestly. And before that, I had spent so much time trying to build this team. But last year was when it became an absolute need that I find people as soon as possible, literally. And so during that time, I knew that it was the right time for me to find a team because I couldn't clone myself enough. I was doing way too many things within the business, and it was so hard for me to even make time to strategize about what the next step would be. I remember even during this period, I was working like 15 to 18-hour days. And this was during the time when our platforms were going viral. But I took a step back even before that and was like, wait a minute, most of the things that I'm doing right now are administrative stuff. And I don't have enough time to do the other things that are important to growing a business. And so that was when I knew it was the right time for me to get someone else on the team as soon as possible. And because social media was such a major push for us, that was the first position that I hired for, social media or a digital manager, digital marketing manager. And then after that, everything else kind of began flowing in. So my team currently is a mix of people that I found after we put out feelers, saying that, hey, we're hiring for these positions. And they were people who had the most passion for what they were doing, which I thought was super important. It took me a very long time to get to this place where I'm like, oh, I have this amazing team and I feel like I can step away from the business and things will still, continue running. Nothing will burn down to the ground. And so I would say even in that situation, my biggest lesson was to go with, sometimes it's not necessarily the person with the most experience, but the person who has the most passion for what, you're doing and who's willing to learn.
That's interesting that you say that, because I've actually heard in other interviews, I've heard other entrepreneurs say that too as well. When you're in this stage of a business and you're bringing on team members, the importance of people being fast learners and passionate, not necessarily always going after people who have a ton of experience at, known companies. That doesn't always work out. All right, thanks for that question, Kyle. I have a follow-up question on top of that to Mandy. So you have a tech platform, obviously, and you don't have a background as an engineer. And I feel like people always ask this question. They'll say, well, I have this idea, but I'm going to go take these coding classes. And it's like, well, you probably can't build your own app and create whatever product you're creating. So can you just share a bit about how you went about working with outside talent or resources to build the tech platform?
Yeah, so in the very beginning, I basically began scouring through different websites like Upwork to find graphic designers. And I just began interviewing people to figure out what their skills are, looking at their portfolio. I think I really struck gold when I began reaching out in different groups for entrepreneurs or for people in tech and just asking if anyone had any resources or had any suggestions for a developer that was skilled in or that could build an Apple and an Android app. And so I think that was where I got most of even the team that we're working with now. I found them through a recommendation from someone I've never met in my life. It was a Facebook group that I went to and asked if anyone had any recommendations. And there was one person who replied with a short list. And so I would say just looking into different communities. There are so many different groups, meetup groups, Facebook groups that you can kind of, jump into and ask, if there are any experienced developers in there that could help. There's also a platform, Apps Without Code, that's also pretty helpful when it comes to building things if you don't have those tech skills.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That is a frequently asked question. So we have another question from Super Duper Anik. Entrepreneurship is said to be all-consuming. So at what point were you able to have a personal life and build your business?
A personal life? What is that? I'm kidding. I'm halfway kidding. I would say it takes work to have a personal life when you're also building a business. It definitely takes you being intentional about it. At what point? I would say maybe about a year or so ago. When I actually began bringing more people onto the team to help out in different areas. But I would say that even then, I would still make time for other things. It's difficult when you're an entrepreneur, you're in the very beginning of what you're doing and you're working ridiculously crazy hours. But for me, I would always set aside at least Friday or my Friday nights and my Saturday nights for myself. Even on weekends, I would still work. But for me, I enjoy doing it. So I think it was just a matter of setting aside time and being really intentional about it and saying, okay, these days I am not doing work. I'm not opening my laptop. I'm turning my phone off, and taking time for me. Yeah, I think that was a lesson that if I could go back in time, I would have done more of that. It's really hard when you're kind of in the mix of things to kind of pull yourself out of it. But one thing that I've gotten really good at is making sure that I have time for myself and creating boundaries as a business owner with my business. So if it's like 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, I might not answer that email. And it's well within my right, that's Mandy time. So yeah, I think it just takes being intentional about different things, to make sure that you have time for yourself, and you should have time for yourself, even if you're at the very beginning of this journey. You should carve out at least a few hours a day, to do whatever you need to do to recharge yourself.
I'm glad you said that at the end, because I was just gonna ask, like, realistically, at what point, do you get the chance to carve out time? But you just answered that.
Yeah. For me, it took time. It took me having a team before I was like, okay, wait, I should. Actually, it took me having a team and going through the pandemic for me to be like, wait a minute. It's really important that I prioritize self-care and my own personal wellness, because I am the owner of this company. Without me, I don't really know what would happen with it. So um, it wasn't until last year that I had that epiphany. No, I still had a personal life in some aspects, but I think last year was the time when it kind of hit me that, wait a minute, I think the world was slowing down in general. And for me, I slowed down a lot as well.
All right. All right. So Natalia wants to know, how has entrepreneurship helped you evolve?
How has entrepreneurship helped me evolve? I would say it's helped me become a lot more bold. There are so many things I've done that I was so scared to do in the very beginning, and I did it anyway. I did it scared. And every single time it gets a little bit easier. So I've always been introverted. I know there's so many people who are like, oh, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to be outgoing and all that other stuff. I call myself an outgoing introvert. But I mean, at the very beginning of my entrepreneurial career, I gave a TEDx talk without having any other type of public appearance, and I was terrified. But those experiences definitely built me up and got me to a place where I'm able to talk in front of a group of people and be confident, or be able to lead a group of people and, share my vision with them and be confident that they're going to take things and run with it, because they're great at what they do, and because I'm great at what I do as a leader as well. So I think it's definitely helped with my own confidence. It's definitely helped with my own ability just to step outside of my comfort zone and do things that scare me.
What I thought was great about what you said in that TED Talk was you explained how you challenged yourself, like, each week, I believe. So you would start with, pushing yourself to do one thing, and once you got over that, you like pushed it even further, which is so important, because to be an entrepreneur, you're going to fail at a lot of things. So you have to be comfortable enough to not succumb to things like shame and fear. Like, you have to be able to put things out there that might not make you look so great. And keep it. So
yeah, I remember my first job was at Atlantic Records, and I remember I was just so shy. I remember being in meetings and not even wanting to speak or say anything. It took so much effort for me to be like, hey, I have something to say. But today I don't stop talking. So I've definitely, the difference between then and now, I've definitely grown a lot more confident in my own voice and being able to speak it, regardless of what other people might think about my ideas or whatever the case may be.
All right. Let's see if there are any more questions. Yes, so Belen wants to know, the New York Times says that the pandemic has led to many more new entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. Do you see this lasting beyond COVID?
I do see it lasting. I think that I think there's been a boom in the amount of entrepreneurs that we have. Sometimes it's out of necessity, you know, being laid off from your job and you have no choice but to look at your own skills and say, okay, let me try and do this thing in the meantime. But at least talking to a lot of the entrepreneurs and a lot of new entrepreneurs, I know there are so many that have faced a lot of hardships, and it's a two-sided coin. There are so many that have done really well during this time period, and a lot of entrepreneurs that have popped up, you know, creating something that would help during this time. When it comes to COVID, we have no idea what the world is going to look like in, you know, 2 years, and how many of the changes that we're currently experiencing will have to live with us over the next couple of years. So I definitely see that lasting, especially with a lot of the support that entrepreneurs have now.
All right, Kyle wants to know, how do you choose which ideas from your page and pages to move forward with?
Ideas. So for that, we'll either do focus groups or we'll literally poll a couple of entrepreneurs in our platform to ask them if they think this thing is useful. Many times we'll get requests from people who are like, hey, I would love it if you did X, Y, and Z. And if we see that we are getting multiple of the same requests, then we'll take that into consideration. But before we implement anything, we always go back to our audience, whether it's, you know, polling different consumers that use our platform, or polling different Black entrepreneurs that use it and asking them, hey, you know, would this be helpful to you? How often do you see yourself using this if we did have it? Is this something that you would even pay for? Asking those questions to kind of gauge which ideas you should run with and which ones you should, you know, keep on the pages. But even in the very beginning, when I didn't have a group of Black business owners to poll, I literally just went to my friends and asked them, hey, if there was this thing, you know, that helped you find Black businesses, would you use it? And that was something that helped us a lot.
All right. Well, I think that is it for our Q&A portion tonight. Again, I want to take the time to say thank you to you, Mandy, for joining us and for sharing your incredible story.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me. I love this conversation.
I enjoyed it as well, and I'm pretty sure that our audience did too. All right. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. You can see more interviews like the one that we've just had with Mandy on our network if you go to www.parsonsentrepreneuracademy.com. Thank you.